Hey, what's up guys? Here we are with another episode of Gameology Conversations, and this time, it's all about sound. Recently, I've been playing a lot of Titanfall 2, and in my opinion, it's one of the finest first-person shooters of this generation. Aside from a crazy fast-paced gameplay and the amazing visuals, Titanfall 2 is a remarkable achievement in sound. So I decided to know more about it by talking with one of the greatest sound designers of this industry, Erik Kraber. Erik started his career at DreamWorks Interactive, and for many years he's been the senior audio director of Electronic Arts. He has been involved in projects like Medal of Honor series, Battlefield, Crisis, Red Alert, and the awesome Titanfall. He's the audio director at Respawn right now, and I have to say, what a cool studio Respawn is. Everybody there is so cool and friendly, and I have to thank Jay Freyshett, community manager at Respawn, to make this interview possible. And again, Jay, make sure you take care of that awesome dog of yours, man. Okay, let's go and listen. Hello and welcome to our podcast, Erik. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Thank you so much. I'm good. It's awesome talking to you, man. Congratulations on Titanfall 2. It's a little late, but I got the game recently and I can't stop playing it. It's amazing, especially the sound, and it's really energetic.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's start us. So how did you become a sound designer? What was the first serious gig for you?
Well, the first, I guess, serious gig out of school was I got an internship at a post-film house called Salzans Film Center. Yeah. That's up in the Bay Area. And I interned there for 2 weeks working on feature films. And then after the 2 weeks, they hired me on as a junior sound guy. And then just kind of worked my way through the ranks there for a while. That was the first official gig that I got. Mm-hmm. That was prior to games. And then I kind of kept in the film industry for a while, I guess 5 or 6 years, maybe, working on feature films. And then I was always a big fan of games and was interested in it. I started a company with my friend started a company, and I joined him doing post sound down here in Los Angeles. I was up in the Bay Area there for a while. Yeah. And we kind of started a small boutique sound design company, and the first gig that we landed was with DreamWorks Interactive. Wow. Working on a Jurassic Park game. In retrospect, we probably were ill-equipped to handle the project, but we were very excited that we got it and had beaten out a bunch of other really high-profile, post-sound houses. And at that time, there was a lot of, outsourcing of sound design work, as there still is, but much more prevalent back then. Yeah. And that was sort of my first introduction to video game sound. And I ended up spending a lot of time over at DreamWorks Interactive because I realized that, doing the sound design was only kind of half of it. And as soon as I handed it off to engineers who, didn't really have an ear for the sound work or just didn't kind of understand the intentions, no matter how detailed I tried giving them instructions, it just kind of wasn't being implemented right. So I realized, God, the implementation is such a big, important part of all this. I really need to be there for all of it. So, there was a period of about a year where I basically had an office there, but I wasn't officially part of DreamWorks Interactive. And at that point, I loved the company and I loved the people, and I loved the vibe of the team that was there, and more so than I probably enjoyed the film work at that time. And so I talked to their creative director there, Patrick Gilmore, and said, like, can I just be official? Can we just start a sound department here? Because the outsourcing doesn't really work. It's like you guys only get half of the creative process there, because you get guys that do great sound work, throw it over the fence, and then it gets poorly implemented and
Exactly.
it doesn't end up sounding good. So that's when my game career started. Was I became the audio director for DreamWorks Interactive back in the late 90s or 1990s.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's great. Please tell us, what is the job and routine of an audio director?
So I guess my job is anything that makes noise in the game. I'm kind of responsible for in some capacity, along with my audio team. But it kind of breaks down to the three main categories of dialogue, music, and sound effects. So on the dialogue side, I'm responsible for the casting of the project, working with the creative director to figure out what the cast should be, what the requirements are there, going through the casting process, being in the sessions and directing the sessions to get the best performances out of the actors. And then, working with my sound team on the implementation of that and the animators and game designers and that kind of thing to make sure that the dialogue gets into the game at high quality and it's the right performance and it fits the emotion of the scene and, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And then on the music side, I work with composers that we've hired for the projects. So I give them both technical and creative direction in terms of here's what we need, how many minutes we need this music to be able to transition to that kind of music. Here's the emotion, the feel, here's the story of what's going on. And then review the work and give notes until, the composer kind of comes with something that we all agree is the right feel and the right fit. And then work with the team for the proper implementation of all that music into the game. And then the third bucket, sound effects. So that's anything from, the intimate Foley sounds, footsteps and gear movement to creature weapon design, ambiances of the levels, the atmosphere. So doing all of that stuff, working with a team. I have a big team that does a lot of the sound design work. I do a smaller and smaller portion over time, but I kind of give them direction as to how we think it should work, and what the main decision points are for emotionally. What should this convey? Technically, how does this need to work within the game engine and the implementation of it? And then overall doing the mix balance for the game. Like I take all the elements that everybody's implemented and I try to come up with the best sounding balance of elements in the game possible, which with a game like Titanfall ends up being an uphill battle. There's just so much chaos going on constantly in the game.
Yeah.
That's generally my responsibility.
That's a really heavy responsibility. So how's the process of sound designing a game like Titanfall 2? Where do you start and how do you proceed?
Well, it starts obviously with discussions. When we were working on Titanfall 1, I actually had been working at Electronic Arts as their audio director for a long time, almost 15 years, working on a lot of projects there, including the majority of the Medal of Honor franchise. And so when I came over to Respawn, there's discussions with our creative director, Steve, and we were trying to figure out what the aesthetic was that we wanted for this, because it was science fiction. And we, he had it in his mind, and we both agreed that the best way to approach the design was to try to make it a little more grounded and gritty and realistic, and not go full sci-fi. We had the rule of no pew pew, like that was always sort of never go to the point that there's no pew pew in it. Like, Star Wars can go there, but that's not our territory. That's their territory. And we'll try to be sort of the modern military plus kind of evolution of the sound. So I think everything kind of gets measured against that. Is how do we try to give it still a sense of grit and realism and groundedness, I guess.
Yeah, that's a smart move.
Fiction.
Because I was playing it and I was I really noticed that it was like my ears are familiar with these sounds, but there are a little bit something into them and makes them more exciting, like shooting a gun.
Cool. Yeah, that was really our approach. We wanted it to be relatable. I also wanted to, through my career, I've always tried to make things feel really physically real. Like the sound physics feel like, okay, this is this weapon or whatever it is actually, behaving like it would in this real world.
Yeah.
So we're trying to find ways to make sure that even though it went to the realm of science fiction, that it always felt like, well, if that is a laser gun, it needs to feel really like that laser gun is being shot in that, that environment at that distance and be modeled in a way that conveys that.
Exactly. Looking back at your career, you've worked on many shooter games. What's interesting in these specific games for you?
I guess it certainly wasn't something planned. I started off when I was at DreamWorks Interactive initially, and a lot of the games we were doing back then were third-person character action. We did some fighting games. There was we were doing a lot of Jurassic Park based franchise games.
Yeah.
And then Medal of Honor was sort of the next thing to come along, and we were actually working on a sequel to to a Lost World game at that point. And Steven Spielberg had just finished doing Private Ryan, and he was very interested in us changing the direction and actually trying to create an experience that felt like, what would it be like for an OSS operative to be behind enemy lines during World War II.
Yeah.
So we kind of stopped everything we were doing on the Lost World at that point and started working on Medal of Honor at that time. And that was sort of the big hit for the team and for the DreamWorks Interactive. So we ended up doing much more of them. And I personally enjoyed that more, I think, because I like the idea of this is coming from the perspective of a human head, that everything you experience can be, translated to the idea of this is my head and my world that I'm turning and I'm looking at things. There's no removal of you from the experience like there is when you're looking at a character on a screen, or you have kind of a 3/4 perspective or a God mode perspective, but you are fully entrenched and living the experience of the sonic world around you. And to me, I find that really compelling, to try to create something that feels like how we all experience things, just walking around in the world and hearing stuff.
The sound of guns and generally shooting in Titanfall 2 is so much fun. Why is that? What makes a gun sound great like Titanfall? And what's the key to achieve something like that?
Well, thank you. I'm glad you think that. Well, it's a few things. I think first off, the gun to be well designed, you need to start with the right elements. You need to have good recordings of real world elements. So we've done a number of weapons recording sessions and gotten a lot of material for that. And then there's the sci-fi element, so that becomes a lot of experimentation, going into the Foley room and trying out different objects, hitting things on different objects, scraping, bending, applying materials to other materials, and just kind of seeing, you kind of have the basis of the realism with the weapons recordings, and then you kind of have the layers of more science fiction or fantasy that you kind of try to create something that's differentiating about the sound. So you kind of start with that and you layer things and build it. I think that having some sense of, I guess I would call it organic mechanical behavior to this gun sounds helps a lot. That every time you pull the trigger, it sort of sounds similar, but it's not the same every single time.
Yeah.
So there's always slight variations that are happening with how the mechanisms are moving against each other, and what the sound of the pop is of the weapon. So there's a lot of playing with the delays of multiple elements that are laid on top of each other, playing with EQ filtering to sort of change the character and the behavior of it, how things all kind of mix together. And then changing the character of that weapon as you change environments. What am I in a large metallic room? How does that sound different than being out in, a corridor versus being out in the open field? And really changing the character of the weapon based on the environment that you're firing it in. Because, long ago when we first were starting to do weapons recording sessions back on, the first few Medal of Honors, when I hadn't done any weapon recording sessions, and looking back on it now, kind of laughing at how badly we did those sessions. We learned so much since then, but it became quickly apparent that, guns are just a pop, and depending on the caliber of the weapon and some other factors, it can maybe sound a little different, but there's such a high, sound pressure level sound that the way microphones tend to pick it up, depending on the microphones you have, just ends up being a pop. And what ends up kind of defining the character is the environment that you fire it in.
Yeah.
So over the years, our techniques have changed to, rather than a lot of coverage of many different weapons in the same location, it's fewer weapons of varying caliber sizes, but trying to move as much as possible, change the direction and the angle that you're firing things, and that tends to give us good material to kind of sell the environments that you fire everything in. So I think that's kind of important. And then I think another thing that we do that some games do, but some games don't, is sort of going against the sense of wanting to make everything as realistic as possible, which we try to start kind of with, is we oversell the connection of your bullets to targets. Which I think is what gives a lot of the satisfaction.
Exactly.
It's not like your gun sound is overpowering the sound of the bullet thumping against your target. As soon as the bullet thumps against the target, we actually duck some of your weapon firing sound a little bit, so that really pops out.
Wow.
And you really can tell I'm missing versus I'm hitting something. So I think having the weapon, always being able to tell what your weapon is connecting with things, or at least when it's a successful connection with something that's your target, then that feedback loop, I think, helps a lot of that sense, like you were saying, of this feels satisfying. I think it creates that sense of satisfaction. And some games do that really well, and other games, strangely, from my point of view, just it's totally missing. So we try to really kind of overemphasize that,
Wow, that's amazing. So, what's the key to design a satisfying, rewarding sound, like upgrades, winning, collecting, and etc.?
Honestly, I don't think I'm very good at it. I think that's probably one of my weaknesses in my arsenal. I tend to have guys on my sound team do that kind of stuff. But I think what it ends up being is, emotionally, you want to convey that sense of success. So a lot of times, like if we're talking about like the power up sounds that happen at the end of a level, or leveling up, which one of the guys on our team, Dave, did. It's about trying to create something that feels strong and powerful, creating a sense of resolution. So there's musical elements that you add, or you think about, the pitchiness of the sound. And then there's also things that you can kind of think of people have almost a Pavlovian-like response to certain sound cues. Like you hear, coins dropping, and, your brain thinks money. So you kind of think about how to incorporate those type of elements, maybe not, as directly. And in fact, like in some of the sounds, we've had to dial back a little bit, but you kind of try thinking, okay, what's the most direct sound that people have this subconscious kind of reaction to, that they just, instinctively get as soon as they hear it. So trying to find that happy spot where it's not so obvious that you're feeding them the sound that they're just plain expecting to hear, but, you know, kind of burying it under some other layers of other interesting sounds that keeps their ear kind of engaged and excited, but also giving them that, you know, gut response of like, yes, I earned something. I know what that feels like. So, yeah, I think that's generally the trick.
Yeah, exactly. I'm curious what audio middleware you guys use at Respawn.
Well, we have two projects going on, but on Titanfall, we are using Miles. We're using a Miles sound system. We had initially looked at others like Wise and Fmod, and for what we needed and the performance we needed to get out of our tool, because the the game needs to run at 60, and we have a ton of stuff going on. We have lots of AI and all the levels, in addition to the, you know, up to 16 players and their Titans all in the battlefield at the same time. So there's a tremendous amount of stuff that's happening in the level simultaneously. So Miles' sound system was really efficient in terms of how it could run audio. And Dan over at Rad Tools, who's the programmer there who works on Miles, is just awesome. He's incredibly responsive, and we started working with him a little bit more than a year, maybe a year and a half before we shipped the second Titanfall. And he was great. He basically, you know, we had 100 feature requests for the tool and for features, and he basically did all of them for us, which was great. So the tool was heavily, I guess, steered towards, you know, our needs. And, you know, obviously we were always trying to be mindful and would have discussions with Dan about making sure that these aren't just, you know, very Titanfall specific requests. These are things that anybody doing any game would probably want to have these types of features. So we kind of kept measuring our requests against that. But yeah, he basically created this system for us that did a lot of the things that we were lacking on the first Titanfall, gave us access to DSP with reverbs and EQs and low pass filters and compression and stuff that we, you know, the Titanfall 1, we had zero of that. There was literally no DSP at all in the first Titanfall. So he helped us create a great tool, and we've been working on that with him ever since.
Yeah. You know, when you're designing a sound, there's always this feeling that it could be even better. And personally, I'm not sure when to stop layering and tweaking a sound. And when is the appropriate time to say a sound is done and it doesn't need any more detail?
My gut says never, but then I look at the clock and the time runs out, and I go,
"Oh, this tells you."
Yeah, I totally know what you mean by that, man. It's tough. It really is tough. I think it helps having other people. I think it helps having other designers help steer you back, because I think I sometimes, for my team, am that guy where they're spinning on something and they keep working with it, and I'm like, you had it yesterday, it was great, like, you know, don't need to keep going. It was really good already. So I think sometimes you need intervening sort of outside perspective to kind of give you a fresh sense of what you're designing, because sometimes you start designing a sound and you have a very specific intention of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And the person that comes in and listens to it doesn't have that perspective. They don't know what's in your head. They just know what you've created.
Exactly.
And a lot of times what you've created is potentially even better than what was in your head initially, but you keep chasing what's in your head, what you're hearing in your head. And sometimes that can send you on a wild goose chase and you end up never getting to it, but you got something great along the way. So I think that helps. I think, you know, like you were saying also with layering, one of the first things I do with a lot of the guys on my team and with myself too is I go through the process of creating the sound and layer and layer and layer and layer. And then it becomes clear that because I was chasing something that I hadn't quite achieved, I ended up sort of blurring the character of the sound that I was trying to create. So it just starts being a lot of pruning. You know, it's like, you know, you have this grown, beautiful tree, but you know, now it's a little out of control, and we need to kind of cut branches here and there to make it look pretty. So I start going through and figuring out, now, is this really adding anything? And I, mute it and then unmute it and mute it and unmute it. And I'm like, is that really changing the overall character of this? Is it making it punchier? Is it making it more distinct? Is it achieving the emotional goal of making it scarier? If not, then I start just pulling out and pulling out and pulling out. And I'm sure guys on my team, I think they've gotten used to it now, but I'm sure initially it was really, really annoying to them when I'd come in and I basically start muting a bunch of their stuff. They'd have 30 layers of things and it ends up being 5 at the end. And I'm like, that's it. You had it right here. This is awesome. So I think they've gotten on board with it now, but initially I think it's probably always tough to have somebody kind of pull back the layers of your work when you've spent so much time and effort trying to get it to a point that you wanted to get it to.
Yeah. So how many people are working in the sound department of Respawn, and how's the process working between coworkers?
So our team here is, we have about 8 sound people in the building right now.
Yeah.
We have a couple dialogue guys, 3 sound designers. I'm an audio director. We have another audio director in the building working on the Star Wars franchise. So yeah, that's our team size now. And in terms of collaboration, well, within the team, it's great. Like, we're all very bonded. I'm very fortunate to have a team of like guys that are just not only, blow you away with their creative talent, but are just a joy to work with. You always kind of have that sense of, these are the guys you're going to be in the trenches with, so you better be good friends with them.
Exactly.
We can spend a lot of hours here, and it can feel like a war trying to get a game done. So, who are you okay with just being around all the time? And I'm lucky to have a group of guys that just, these are the guys I would fight alongside any day of the week. So, the interaction between us is great, and even between the projects is nice. We have, bond, and we go out and do activities outside of work with, lunches and things. And we're all very open about what we share and giving feedback to each other and trying to help each other out. So within the sound team, it's great. And then the team in general is really good. Everybody's very open to ideas. The design team, is always thinking about audio and open to our ideas when we have, something we want to share, even when it's not audio related, even when it's design or art related. Like, we don't have, and there's no sense here at Respawn that you can't share your opinion because it's not your place. There's sort of a mutual respect amongst everybody that, hey, if you have an opinion, then share it.
That's great.
So the collaboration is really good, and it takes a lot of effort to keep the communication going, especially when things are really, really busy. But it works really well.
Yeah. So please, let's go geeky now. Please tell us about the tools and plugins you use.
Well, you got to tell me about your plugins and tools. What do you use?
Me for the I work with the DAW. I work with Ableton Live.
Okay, great. Yeah, I use it.
Yeah, and I use Fmod as a middleware.
Cool.
A bunch of other plugins there. Yeah. Mostly for the EQs and stuff. I use Fab Filter stuff.
Nice.
Yeah, that's solid.
Yeah, I use Ableton at home for my music related things, and occasionally use it for sound design stuff. But I don't use
it's a good
my main tool here.
Thing for
it's great.
Sound design too. Yeah.
Oh, it is great for sound design. It's really, really good. We have a couple of guys here use it. But we, as a studio for our main DAW, we use Nuendo by Steinberg. And which
not Pro Tools.
I know exactly. I was going to say.
Why is that?
The story. We started with back at the EA. Pro Tools was where it was at. But it quickly became apparent to me that it was very difficult to get money to buy when we were working in a building where everybody works on a PC except you, because they're buying Macs for you. And then they're having to buy, this is back in the day where you had to buy the 888s, if you remember those. I don't know how old or young you are, but maybe you don't remember those days. No. But you had to buy specific dedicated hardware with Pro Tools. Like, you couldn't just get the software. So, it ended up being $20,000 a person to start getting people going with the audio. That, as our team was growing, at one point I think we had 20 audio people. So that started becoming harder and harder to justify the cost. And then we tried Steinberg's Nuendo and just loved it, and was like, wow, we can run this on a PC and I can use any audio card I want. And the software itself is only a couple $1,000s. So it became, it started out as a financial choice, but we have now since, we're so used to Nuendo and love the features of Nuendo that even at lunch yesterday, Bradley, one of the sound guys on our team, was even commenting on how painful and frustrating it was to go to Pro Tools, that there are so many features that Nuendo does that Pro Tools still doesn't do, that, I'm sure the same the other way around. But he was very frustrated and was like, man, we have a couple guys on our team that are Pro Tools diehards, and they've converted as well. We're pretty happy with using Nuendo. So we use that as our main DAW, and then we use SoundForge mostly as our sort of single file editor. And then plugins, we kind of run the range. We got a lot of the Waves, one of the Waves bundles. We've got the Isotope. We use RX and a bunch of other Isotope plugins. We use Sound Toys, GRM tools for some heavier designy stuff. Those are the main ones that we use. I'm probably forgetting some right now, but those are the main sort of categories. Oh, and then the Altiverb and speakerphone, which are essentials. I wish they ran better on PC than they do, but they're great tools.
Yeah, great. So last question: what was the last inspiring game for you, considering the sound?
That's always a tough one to answer, because I think when I listen to stuff, I feel like
it shouldn't be a game from EA.
So many games impress me. So many games impress me, and so many games frustrate me. And oftentimes they're the same game. So I'll tend to, like, for instance, now I'm playing through Witcher 3, and it's really good. I mean, I look at a game of that scope and listen to the voice performances, and I'm like, how did they get such good voice performances across the board? I mean, usually when you have so many characters and so many voices and so many voice actors, there's always something kind of cringeworthy in there where you're like, ooh, yeah, that was a bad performance. Just the sheer nature of volume, you're bound to, have people that kind of can't pull it off. But man, it's just consistent and really good. And the sound design's really good in that game as well. I think historically I don't really have games in my mind that I go, that game is, everything about it is brilliant. I think usually I'm like, you look at Battlefield and go, wow, the soundscape for weapons are spectacular, or you'll, back to the original, Thief, like that was sort of the first game that really incorporated a lot of sound mechanics, and they did that really well, or other games like, Limbo was, I thought, brilliant, and I loved the sound in that, and it made me jealous I wasn't working on indie projects. Like, dang it, I'm working on AAA games. I shouldn't be working on AAA games. I should be indie projects because they can be so creative. But so I think there aren't a lot of ones that stand out in my mind as much as it is. I listen to it and I go, oh my God, the way they did Foley for that was so good. How can we do that? Or man, the creature sounded so good. How can we do that? So, so being sort of more categorical than anything else.
Yeah. So thank you very much, Erik. And it was a pleasure talking to you. And thanks for all the amazing experiences you and the amazing guys at Respawn created for us.
Thank you. Yeah, I appreciate it. And it's great talking to you.
Yeah, me too.
Talking to you.